Should we be buying Martin Dubravka? Rotation fears everywhere at the back. What is the perfect five-man midfield? And why on earth did I buy Darwin Nunez? All of this and the fact that I've got a brand new green screen in this week's team selection video. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. On today's team selection video, I do bring with me a couple of upgrades to the YouTube channel. Green screen behind me and some good lighting in front of me. So hopefully it upgrades the setup just that little bit more and makes these even better quality videos for you. However, on to the more important stuff and the team from last game week. Let's just take a really quick look at how it performed in game week 14. So 62 points was very slightly above average, and it meant that I had another green arrow, so that's 3 on the trot now, although this one was only about 15k, so up to 275k now. Happy with how it's progressing, but again, I want to keep putting these green arrows back to back, so hopefully we can get inside the top 200k pretty swiftly, hopefully before Christmas. Looking at the team itself, 62 points, Areola in goal is definitely a point of contention. We'll be talking about him and potential replacements in just a moment's time. In defence, the only return was Tsimikas with that assist. And in midfield, luckily, all of them returned points for me. Anthony Gordon, yet again, getting a double-digit haul for me. And he's getting less and less differential every single week, but he's still putting in the shifts and getting me good points. And that is a big reason as to why I've been getting green arrows in the last few weeks. And Buemo was one of my transfers in, not the only transfer in, but he got me the assist. I did sell Bowen for him, who got nothing. So up on that move, and then Saka, Son and Salah all returning as well. Son obviously getting 3 returns, although one of them was that own goal. But overall, very happy with midfield. Up front, Haaland was my captain, 7 points from him. Obviously, very unlucky not to get more. Couple of pretty simple chances by his standard that he should have finished, and of course he did put Grealish through on goal, which was ruled offside, or not even ruled offside rather, but it was ruled out by the referee, who was trying to play advantage but all of a sudden didn't for some reason. So that could have been another assist, and obviously Haaland complaining at that got him the yellow card as well. So little bit frustrating there, but the main point of frustration in the starting 11 was Darwin Nunez. He's a brand new player to my side. I wasn't expecting to buy him in game week 14, but with the news that Ollie Watkins seemingly was an injury out, I did act quickly and maybe rashly to bring in Darwin Nunez based on that information. And I think looking back, if I'd had a week to analyse that and a week of Watkins being a doubt, I might have maybe thought differently and maybe just held on to him on the chance that he started the Bournemouth game. And then if he didn't, I would have just had Arch to come off the bench rather than shifting my plans altogether. But we'll talk about Darwin more in a minute and what I plan to do with him over the next few game weeks. But obviously he didn't return, Watkins did. It could have been a much bigger green arrow if I'd either held on to Watkins or started Charlie Taylor over Matty Cash. But we live and we learn. I'm not going to get too upset about it. It's still a green arrow and I own my decisions. So with that in mind, let's take a look at how I'm going to plan not to mess up my decisions moving into game week 15. So the moves that I made last week meant that I do now have 1 million in the bank. So I've got a little bit of leeway if I want to use it. Now, I'm going to start off with the keepers in focus for now. And at the start of the video, I mentioned Martin Dubravka. Now, he is a player that I'm definitely interested in transferring in this game week. So let's take a look at what that transfer might look like. Here you go. It would be Areola to Dubravka in one straight move. 4.3 million Areola down to 3.9 million Dubravka would mean that I save even more money. And obviously Dubravka playing for such a good defence as Newcastle is, I would expect them to keep more clean sheets in the next few games than West Ham, who have still only kept 1 clean sheet all season. So it's going to be a popular move for a lot of managers. Newcastle's fixtures over the next 5 game weeks are really good. And if they keep performing at the level that they have done so far this season, he will be a pretty decent pickup. Now, there are a couple of considerations with Martin Dubravka that are putting me off making this move right now. Now, number one is, as it stands, we don't actually have full concrete news on how long Nick Pope's going to be out. All of the suggestions are it's going to be a very lengthy absence of 4 to 5 months. So I think we can say with relative confidence that he's going to be out for, no matter what, a pretty considerable amount of time. However, moving on to one or two other issues, one being Dubravka is the second choice keeper at Newcastle. He's not the first choice for a reason, which means that you would expect Newcastle to have slightly more defensive issues with him in the side rather than Nick Pope. Now, obviously, you'd still expect them to keep the odd clean sheet. You'd still expect them to be a pretty good defence overall. But at a certain point, are all of these injuries to their back line going to catch up with them? And are they going to become a weaker defence? Well, I would probably suggest not significantly enough for him not to be a good option over the next few. But when you add that into the other issues, and the other issues being that obviously January is right round the corner, they could be in the market for a new goalkeeper by that point, then maybe it's something that you need to consider. The other thing that I need to consider in my team in particular is whether or not I want to block myself out with 3 Newcastle players. So those 3 players would be Lascelles, Dubravka, and Anthony Gordon. Now, that has a glaring error in it that it doesn't have Kieran Trippier as part of those 3 Newcastle players. Trippier is a player that I definitely want to own at some point in the next few game weeks. And if I go for Martin Dubravka, it would make getting Trippier very, very difficult. Now, it's not impossible to get over to him from Lascelles in a few game weeks, but it does make that move very, very difficult. So whilst this is a potential transfer I am looking at, I'm also trying to consider the consequences of this action, and I don't want to lock myself out of making moves in the future that I'm probably even more keen to make. So moving back to the defence in general this game week, and I do have Lascelles as that Newcastle defensive coverage for the time being. Now, it is important to note that Lascelles, whilst he's probably okay for this game week and probably game week 16 as well, Botman is now back in training with the full team. So he is in proper first team training again. He's not just doing gym work anymore. So he will probably be back sooner rather than later. I think the fact that the fixtures are pretty congested for the time being favours the idea that Lascelles might get a couple more starts before he becomes a real issue, but time is running out on him. So I do need to worry about when I'm going to get rid of Lascelles from my starting lineup. Now, I do have 4 defenders that I trust. So Lascelles, Tsimikas, Saliba and Cash, but I've already discussed in previous videos that Cash is a bit of an issue. For instance, Lascelles is going to be an issue, and Tsimikas probably is going to get rotated at some point as well. So maybe I need to start considering an out route for Lascelles sooner rather than later. However, with that being said, and with only 1 free transfer ready to use, Lascelles probably does survive the chop this week. Moving across to Tsimikas, he could get rested this week. It is a possibility that I am a little bit worried about, but with Taylor first on my bench with Wolves away from home, yes, Wolves do score a fair amount these days. They're not a bad attack all of a sudden, but Taylor hasn't been too terrible. I don't want to make the same mistake I made last game week and rush to bring in another player on the off chance that Tsimikas misses the match and therefore leave myself in a weaker position moving forward. I think I'd rather just leave Tsimikas in, hope he starts in what is a fantastic fixture against Sheffield United, and if he does, then hopefully the upside's good enough that it outweighs the risk that he only gets 20 minutes, 10 minutes off the bench against Sheffield United. So I think for the time being, I'm happy to hold him. But again, I'm conscious that this week might not be the ideal week for him. Moving across, Saliba, not going to talk about him too much. Luton away from home. It's not going to be easy for Arsenal. Luton are better at home than they are away from home, but Saliba is pretty nailed into that Arsenal starting lineup. I don't expect him to get rotated too often at all this season. And Luton is objectively a better fixture than most others. So I would say this back 3, if they all start, I'm very happy with them this game week. But I am slightly worried about what the future does hold for the likes of Lascelles, Tsimikas and Matty Cash. Now, Matty Cash, stuck on my bench, he's my 5th defender this game week. He probably will start the game against Man City, but it is Man City, so I don't expect much from him. And moving forwards, I'm now more worried about his minutes. So he is a player that I'm probably going to be looking at getting rid of in the next couple of game weeks. That being said, yet again, I don't think I need to sell him this game week. I could do it, and the two players that I'd probably look at selling him for this week would be Porro or maybe Reece James. Now, I discussed them both in my transfer tips video earlier this game week. I don't think I'm convinced enough on either of them right now to make that move this week. I prefer more data. I prefer to see them yet again, see how they perform in midweek before jumping on either. And also, I'm slightly hesitant because that Matty Cash position is a lot easier to upgrade to the likes of Kieran Trippier than it would be directly from Lascelles. Obviously, I would need less money in the bank to make that move, so I'm wondering if maybe I can free up $1 million elsewhere and then go directly from Matty Cash to Kieran Trippier in a couple of game weeks' time. Let me know in the comments what you think of my back three and whether or not you would maybe change the defensive order on my bench as well. I'm conscious that maybe this isn't the ideal starting lineup for this game week, especially when we consider the idea that maybe one or two of these defenders does get rotated. So the 5 men in this midfield, I would say pretty much the ideal 5 right now in FPL. I'm very happy with this 5. Salah is probably going to be my captain this game week. Sheffield United away from home. Maybe there's a slight chance he does get rotated. If he's ever going to get rotated, it would be in a midweek game against undoubtedly the worst side in the league. However, I still personally think he starts, and I think given the fact that it's maybe a 1 or 2% chance he does get rotated, I'm still pretty confident that the armband is pretty firmly secure on him at the moment. I will discuss my vice captain in just a moment's time as well. I think you can probably guess who it's going to be. But I think for a couple of reasons, I favour Mo Salah, and I'll probably debate that more closely in the next section. Moving across, Son obviously proved that he is still a very good asset to own in FPL against Man City. I think he was very unfortunate not to return in the previous 3 game weeks before that. The data was still looking pretty decent. They were still creating chances for him, and I'm just glad that he is now returning output again, which maybe just gives me that extra little layer of confidence in him moving forward. So Son going absolutely nowhere. Arguably, you could even look at potentially captaining him this game week at home to West Ham. But I think that Sheffield United fixture is maybe slightly too good to go against for Mo Salah. Moving across, Saka against Luton away. Very happy with him. I don't really need to discuss him too much anymore. I've already discussed him at length in my previous video this game week in the transfer tips. So if you want a really well thought out opinion on Saka, please do go and check that out and you'll get my extended thoughts on him there. Moving across, Mbeumo was my transfer in last game week. I've got 3 more good game weeks out of him to come before he reaches that blank in game week 18, at which point I can either make a decision to bench him for 1 week if my other 12, 13 players are strong enough, or I can sell him for that game week. Across to Gordon, again, he has been probably the player of the season in my side so far. He is directly responsible for a lot of my gains in the last few game weeks, and I'm very, very glad I brought him in on my wildcard back in game week 8. Hopefully that continues. He has got a knock going into the game against Everton, but it does seem to be a pretty minor thing. He said himself after the game that a lot of the Newcastle starting 11 are carrying and playing through knocks at the moment. So I'd expect him to start yet again in midweek. It is his former club. He came out in some of the pre-match interviews stating as if he was excited to play this game and looking forward to the game. So I would suggest that hip injury is probably just a minor thing and he's probably going to start. If he does start, I expect returns against Everton. So fingers crossed he performs yet again for me. And even though he's becoming less and less of a differential in my side, I'm very happy to own him. And I would say budget taken into consideration, this would be the perfect midfield 5 to take into the next couple of game weeks. But I'm sure there are plenty of you who do disagree with me, so please do let me know in the comments below what your ideal 5-man midfield would look like ahead of the next 3 or 4 fixtures. So as you can see, my vice captaincy at the moment is on Erling Haaland, and I did deliberate over putting it on Haaland for captaincy this week as well. However, I think the fact that Villa, yes, they play the high line. Yes, they are conceding a few goals at the moment, but they are fundamentally a much, much better side than Sheffield United are. Salah is not far off, if not as good as an FPL option as Erling Haaland is so far this season as well. And I think in a direct head-to-head, if you gave them the same exact fixture in the same conditions, they'd probably come out pretty much evenly. They're both away from home this week. Salah has the easier fixture. And yes, Haaland can benefit from the Villa high line. They are conceding goals, but Sheffield United are undeniably very, very poor this season. And I think Salah over Haaland is fairly locked in my mind anyway. Haaland as well, away from home, is not quite as effective an FPL option as he is at home. He has a much better track record at home than he does away from home. So I think overall, that's enough to make me put the armband on Salah rather than Haaland this game week. However, he's still a decent enough option, and I could see people going with him and potentially gaining from that. At the end of the day, it is a marginal call. I think based on the fact that Sheffield United are just that bad a team, I'm putting the armband on Salah for the time being. With that in mind, I'm also pretty happy to own and hold Darwin Núñez for this game week. Sheffield United away from home, as we mentioned, a very good fixture. And if he's going to score against anyone, it's probably going to be against them. Overall, I am regretful of my decision to sell Ollie Watkins based on limited information. I think it would have been wiser for me to just hold on to him, not knowing whether he started against Bournemouth or not, and then holding him for the next run of fixtures. He would have maybe missed the Bournemouth game, but he would have probably come back in against Man City anyway. And whilst I don't think he's necessarily a buy for Darwin Núñez this game week, I think I would have liked the look of my side moving forwards over the next few game weeks if I still had him in it. So I do have regret over that, but given the fact we are in this position now anyway, if he starts the game, Sheffield United is a fantastic game for Darwin Núñez, so I'm happy to hold him on the chance that he does play the full 90 or at least get good minutes in this game. And to be honest, even if he comes on for the back 30, the final 30 minutes, I'd expect him to have a pretty decent chance of returning in just 30 minutes anyway. So I think he's a fairly easy hold for me this game week, and I'll hold him for probably the next 2 game weeks at least, and then look at bringing Ollie Watkins back in ahead of game week 18 when he goes up against Sheffield United at home. However, for the time being, I'm pretty happy with my starting 11 as it stands. There are a couple of players that are more questionable this game week, but overall, I think rolling the free transfer and having 2 in game week 16 gives me the flexibility I need to potentially be looking at more wholesale changes and righting a couple of mistakes I've made in previous game weeks. Darwin Núñez, I'm looking at you. So there you have it. That's my team selection ahead of game week 15. Do make sure you lock in your teams ahead of the Tuesday evening deadline. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and hopefully you enjoyed my green screen upgrade as well. In the meantime, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, it would be greatly appreciated. More updates and more improvements are always on the way. So hopefully you're enjoying the content so far, but if you bear with me, it's going to get hopefully even better really soon. In the meantime, I hope you all have a great game week 15, and I'll see you as we start preparing for game week 16 on Thursday.